Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us, the folks here in the room, for the resumption of in-person events at Columbia University. It's great to see people in person, and we have hundreds more joining online. So for everyone joining virtually, welcome virtually to Columbia University, and good to have you all here at this event for the Center on Global Energy Policy. For those who don't know me, my name is Jason Bordoff. I'm the Director of the Center on Global Energy Policy, the co-founding dean of the Columbia Climate School, and really delighted to welcome you all here for what could not be a more timely discussion about the energy crisis and the broader crisis created by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, with the woman at the center of it all, Commissioner Kadri Simson. It's been a turbulent, in many ways tragic year in 2022 with Russia's invasion, which has caused destruction, humanitarian catastrophe in Ukraine. The consequences of the conflict are being felt all around the world in many ways, including in commodity markets, and key to that is the global energy system. The global community is facing what may be one of the worst energy crises. We'll see how this plays out since the oil crises of the 1970s. Oil prices are rising, gas prices are surging, particularly in Europe and in Asia. Even before most of Russian energy exports have been in any way directly targeted by import bans or sanctions, which may be coming. We'll ask the commissioner about that. The crisis is particularly acute, obviously, in Europe, which used to draw 40% of its natural gas, 25% of its oil from Russia. Due to Putin's aggression and the sanctions put in place in response, European countries now are working to figure out how to find alternative and secure, affordable sources of energy. And all of this, of course, is occurring against the backdrop of the ever worsening climate crisis and the need, as the UN IPCC reminded us not long ago, to move much faster to facilitate a clean energy transition. So again, I'm really delighted to welcome Kadri Simson here, the European Commissioner for Energy, responsible for all of those things, ensuring Europe has affordable, secure, sustainable energy supply. So she has one of the more difficult and challenging jobs in the global energy sector right now. She's been traveling the world in recent weeks, looking for solutions to the complex challenges facing the European energy system. We're very fortunate to have her join us here at Columbia this afternoon. Please join me in welcoming Commissioner Simson. Let me just quickly say the event is being webcast live. The full video recording will be available online in the coming days. For those joining us via Zoom, you can, when we switch to opening it up to questions from the audience, you can submit a question for Kadri at any time by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We're happy to share. Our events are now closed captioned. You can turn the caption on by clicking the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen and then selecting show subtitles. So there's a lot of ground to cover. Let's jump right into it. And I just want to start with sort of a broad question, and then there are many things to get into. In particular, the gas price in Europe is over $30, the sort of TTF benchmark. Oil is over $100. Again, this is with most Russian exports still flowing. Can you just sort of set the scene for all of us, talk about where we are in the energy crisis now? Maybe that's not the right word to use. Maybe it's not a crisis yet. What's the situation in Europe? What are your priorities to ensure secure, affordable, sustainable energy supplies?
Thank you. Well, basically now I can deliver you an academic lecture because this question was a very broad question. Last time when we met, it was a week before war started in Munich Security Conference, and we had a panel about the crisis and what is happening in Europe with the situation of extremely high commodity prices. Since last autumn, we have witnessed a peak that at first we thought came due to the very fast recovery of the world economy after COVID pandemic. Then day by day we figured out that there might be also a uncertainty in our gas market because our market participants felt that Russian Gazprom is not a trustworthy partner. They traded against the future uncertainties with higher and higher prices. That made our task very clear. We had to reach out to international partners to find where else we can find alternative gas supplies because Russia is a major gas supplier to the European Union, but not the only one. So Europe is connected with Russia via several pipelines. The most famous one is Nord Stream that connects Russia with Germany. It was built to avoid the route via Ukraine, but still that pipeline via Ukraine to Russia, from Russia to Europe delivers gas even today. And then there is pipeline also through Turkey to Europe and through Belarus and Poland. And this is a pipeline that yesterday Gazprom announced they will not use anymore, but well, basically the volumes via this Polish pipeline were very low already since last December. So we knew that, that there is lots of uncertainty and we have to find alternatives. We have done so. Well, our partners with whom we do have pipeline connection, Norway, Azerbaijan, Algeria, all of them have promised to step up their production and have done so. And then on top of that, we do have a pretty solid network of LNG terminals, and Qatar and especially United States have helped us during this winter. So we have received additional record high volumes of LNG to Europe. But of course, it means that energy is significantly more expensive than it was a year ago. And our governments and prime ministers, but also energy ministers are very worried how to help the households and businesses to keep their competitive, well, for businesses, this is competition. For households, it's normal livelihood, how to support them. And that's why we are also guiding our member states, what they can do with taxes and levies and direct support payments. And this is basically what we are doing. Now, since 24th of February, when war started, we are also preparing different sets of sanctions. And the first one that we announced already first days of the war targeted already Russian energy sector. So basically, we made impossible for them to maintain their oil fields and refineries. We are not delivering equipment, and they can't find, it is impossible to find any alternative suppliers. And that means that if before the war, Russia produced 7 million barrels crude oil daily, then day by day, their production will decrease. And this now opens another venue for us. So we have to find oil producers who are willing to produce more, because we are taking away their production from the market, and everybody knows if there is a deficit, the world oil market reacts in a similar way like we witnessed with the gas market.
Well, that was a great, broad, high-level opening because it brought up many of the issues I want to go a little deeper on. Let's maybe start with what you said, the sanctions that have been put in place and additional sanctions that may be coming. With some exceptions, like the ban on imports to the US and action by the UK, Russian oil and gas hasn't been directly targeted, but there's speculation that's what's coming next. Europe putting a ban on Russian crude, maybe product is more difficult, like gasoline and diesel. Gas, natural gas may be the most difficult. I saw the news this morning reported that Germany says it's ready to stop buying Russian oil. If that's true, does that mean that that's what's coming next? We should expect soon that there'll be a ban on Russian crude into Europe in the next round of EU sanctions?
We are working on, well, President von der Leyen said to journalists that everything is on the table. So you might expect that there will be second round, sixth round of sanctions. But we have to be prepared. Well, when we are announcing sanctions, then they have to hit Russia more severely than us. And that means that with these energy carriers, we need to have alternatives. We presented a plan. This is called Repower EU. And with this plan, we explained how we can get rid of Russian fossil fuels, and to be honest, we will not be able to replace 100% Russian imports with alternative suppliers. So we have to promote savings wherever we can. We will save energy, and the National Energy Agency produced that 10-step plan how to how to save oil, how to save gas, some simple things that every individual could do, and then some more demanding curtailment measures too. And then, of course, where we can, we have to electrify so that instead of fossil fuels, we can cover our demand with electricity. And that's why we are announcing soon a program how to shorten the permitting, because in Europe, wherever you would like to install a wind park or solar park, there is already someone else using this land. So we have to find a way how multi-use is possible, or use these territories that are not under such a strong competition. For example, rooftop solar is a easy way to scale up renewables production.
Some of that, of course, takes time. It takes time for the vehicle fleet to turn over to electricity, or for homes to be retrofitted for electric heat pumps rather than gas. So when you think about, as you said, preparing both in the immediate term for the next coming year, for the coming winter, and then the longer term, but in the near term, when you think about actions that Europe might take, like a ban on Russian crude, and then asking where will alternative oil supplies come from, the US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said the other day that an EU ban on Russian energy imports would clearly raise global oil prices and would have a damaging impact on Europe and other parts of the world. I'm wondering if you agree with that, and what do you think the response would be, where there's not that much extra crude out in the global market right now, a little bit in OPEC. We've already kind of made the largest strategic petroleum reserve release in history. How would Europe cope with the loss of Russian crude to the continent?
Well, just a week ago, I visited the OPEC headquarters. We had European Union OPEC dialogue, and I had a chance to also bilaterally discuss what are their free capacities, but OPEC members have not brought back to the market since they decided to cut their production due to our pandemic and all these lockdown measures that resulted with a situation 2 years ago when world seas were full of tankers looking for harbors. And in some cases, oil price was close to zero.
Or negative.
Yeah. So they made an agreement then, and now they are reluctant to increase their production so fast because they're still monitoring global developments. For Europe, we do have in place an obligation for all the member states to keep strategic oil reserves worth of 90 days consumption. This is 3 months. And as you mentioned in your introductory remarks, Russia is responsible for 25% of our oil imports. So basically, we do have strategic reserves worth of 1 year's volumes that we receive from Russia. But this is for 1 year, and we have to be ready that this crisis and our willingness not to sponsor Russia's regime will last longer. And that's why we are reaching out to the other oil-producing countries. I do believe that they feel their responsibility and will step up. And indeed, the strategic oil reserve was created to handle this situation that high crude oil price might bring to the world markets. There are analysts who are saying that at certain price level, we might expect global recession. this year we have released already twice partially these oil reserves. And this is very significant because in history, this has happened only 3 times. When there was a Gulf War, when there was Hurricane Catherine, and then last time Libya, war in Libya. So, and this year already twice due to the Ukraine war. So it has been a significant step, and I think that it had impact to the markets to calm them a little bit.
I'm curious, if may ask, when you met, currently, as you said, OPEC is gradually increasing production, and people have said maybe you can do it faster. So when you met with OPEC, what did they say?
Well, basically they reminded the situation that if you close down a oil field, then this is not so easy to increase your production overnight. And they do have a agreement among themselves. What they also told me that each month they are meeting again to discuss if the situation is changing in the way that they have to step up. And we all know that world oil prices will have more severe impact for the countries who are developing countries. And if oil price remains high for a longer period, then basically we will witness famine and hunger in Africa, and this is very close to OPEC countries, so they really do have responsibility there.
Yeah, and an important point, I guess, is not just OPEC, it is OPEC plus, meaning Russia is now part of the group kind of making the decision about how quickly to bring oil supply back to the market. When you talk about a ban on Russian crude to Europe, would you expect that Russian oil would just be redirected and find other global markets, or are there things Europe is trying to do to make sure that doesn't happen? And actually the total volume Russia is able to sell to the world is reduced, and therefore the revenue is reduced.
Well, oil that they transport using tankers might find other harbors, other terminals, but this is clear that then they have to sell it with significant discounts. And this is the aim of the sanctions, that they will not earn these revenues that they do earn without sanctions.
So maybe an optimal outcome is a significant amount of Russian oil still finding its way to the global market that doesn't have that many other alternatives, but they're forced to take a discount and get less revenue for it. That's part of the policy.
Exactly.
Goal.
So they will lose revenues.
And let me ask you also, I think the focus has been on Russian crude, not yet product, gasoline and diesel. And I'm wondering if that's correct, if it's more difficult for Europe to do without Russian gasoline and diesel markets in particular are kind of in crisis right now. When you look at New York Harbor, you see that pretty clearly, and that we know it doesn't get as much attention as gasoline prices, but you know how important it is in trucking and in agriculture and in shipping. And how seriously is Europe thinking about diesel and gasoline as well as crude oil?
Well, quoting our president, everything is on table. but indeed, we have had our challenges with diesel because right now, well, we are planning ahead, like until 2050, and then we have our 2030 targets, and then this is this everyday action right now, and majority of my team's time. Not majority, but very significant time is dedicated how we can help Ukraine. And as you know, Russians are targeting Ukrainian infrastructure and their storage and refineries. And that's why we needed to find from Europe alternative diesel volumes so that we can ship them to Ukraine so that their farmers can start the sowing season. And it was not so easy because of the stress in the market already, but it was again very necessary because if Ukrainian farmers cannot start their agricultural season this spring, then the result will be that there is nothing to harvest in the autumn, and again well, they are European, they are world breadbasket. Without their production, Africa will starve again.
Yeah, it's a really important point. We talk a lot about energy and an energy crisis because we are an energy center. The potential food crisis that we may be seeing unfold in the coming months is potentially severe and connected to energy because energy is an important input to food costs. As difficult as it would be for Europe to think about doing without Russian crude, I think you would agree it's even more difficult to think about doing without Russian natural gas. So I just want to ask you also of the news of the day or of yesterday with the Russia announcing it's cutting gas supplies to Poland and Bulgaria. How significant an escalation is that and how will Europe respond?
I was 2 days ago in Poland, so I came directly from Warsaw to America. And well, Poland decided already 10 years ago that they will diversify from Russian gas supplies to alternative suppliers. So by the end of this year, they face the situation anyway that the Gazprom contract, long-term contract expired. They already announced that they will not prolong it. On the contrary, they built a new pipeline that connects them with Norway, so they will get significant volumes from Norway. They built LNG terminal, so they are ready to receive LNG shipments. And next week, I will go back to the region because we are opening the pipeline that connects also Poland with Lithuania. So they are ready for this situation. And on top of that, the underground storage is also full. And Bulgaria is also connected with neighbors. So already neighboring countries indicated that they can cover Bulgarian needs, which are not so significant. So if Polish yearly consumption is 20 billion cubic meters, then Bulgaria's volumes were 3.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask, I guess I see it may be the case that 1 or 2 countries can make do without Russian gas because they can pull supplies in from elsewhere. But if you start to expand that to many other countries, it becomes harder to pull supplies in from elsewhere because there's only so much supply out there. So the ostensible reason for this, the refusal to pay in rubles, Putin's demand that gas you pay in rubles, how will that be addressed by other countries like Germany or others that for whom it would be really much, much more difficult and a more severe economic consequence if Russian gas was disrupted? I guess in the coming weeks, other countries will have to decide what do they do in response to the Kremlin's demand that payment be made in rubles, and should they be worried that gas will be cut in response?
Mm-hmm. Well, our response was very, very clear that Putin right now uses gas shipments as a weapon, and this is a blackmailing. Russia has signed contracts with European companies, not governments, but private companies for gas shipments. And these contracts are designed in the way that unilaterally you cannot change the agreement. And these contracts, 97% of them are signed either in euros or dollars. So, the proposal now that our company should start paying for these deliveries in rubles is a clear breach of contracts. And well, this kind of activity clearly will have consequences. The clearest consequence is that everybody understands that Russia is not a trusted partner. Our guidance to our companies is that we will not start payments in rubles. Well, Russia actually is dependent on fossil fuel revenues. So they can't, well, they can if they don't care about their economy. They can do whatever they want if they don't care about their people and the revenues that should be used for education, pensions, healthcare, but basically unilaterally, they cannot open those contracts.
So just to clarify, because there seem to be conflicting press reports sometimes about whether payment in rubles violates European sanctions. So it does.
Well, any kind of activity that involves Russian central bank is clearly against existing sanctions. But continuing your payments in well, the long-term contracts and payments to the Gazprom bank in euros and dollars is in accordance with current situation.
So is there a way you see that would be consistent with sanctions, that with conversion in Gazprom bank, Putin would be able to feel as if he's receiving payment in rubles and gas purchases can continue, or how significant is this issue going to be that it really might provide a justification if the Kremlin wants to cut gas to other countries in the coming weeks?
Well, I think that Kremlin doesn't need any justification to do that. And this was the reason why already from the very beginning of this year, before the war started, but well, we saw what is happening behind the Ukrainian borders, we renewed our contingency plans. It was clear that they can disrupt the flows overnight without any excuses. So I think this is right now the situation that they can cut flows country by country. There might be full disruption. Of course, it will have impact to European economy because there are not alternative suppliers who can cover 155 billion cubic meters that we received from Russia. But then we have to do all the steps that we know are necessary, and of course it also means that then we have to reach out to our international partners, for example, the ones who are also consumers of LNG, so that we can reroute some of the pre-contracted vessels like we have done already, but then we need this help even more.
Yeah, talk about what some of those contingency plans are. If the Russian gas supply to Europe were cut, which doesn't seem impossible right now, particularly given events in the last several days, how would Europe cope with that? I know you mentioned before the Repower EU plan, which includes a goal of reducing Russian gas imports 2/3 by the end of the year. I think there's some healthy skepticism that may be overly optimistic, may be hard to achieve. Talk about the most important steps that would need to be taken and how Europe would cope with the disruption in Russian gas supply.
Well, first of all, in the next 5-year period, we will prioritize renewables, but it takes time. Even if we are talking about hydrogen that would replace the molecules, biomethane, we do have very ambitious targets, but ambitious targets looking towards 2025, 30. This year we need to find alternative suppliers. Well, we have to also take care of our consumers. So that's why we announced that we will set up a platform to use this leverage that EU 27 member states actually do have in world markets. And we can negotiate with international partners who are ready to trade the gas to us, but they would like to see what is market perspective, because they have to do their part. They have to invest to scale up the production. And I think this platform that accommodates our joint purchases is a way forward also for our member states, because at this moment we don't want to end up in the situation where private companies are competing against each other. This is a moment where governments also have to support. And another very important cooperation is how we will coordinate these shipments between our LNG terminals, because we do have LNG terminals, but some of them are already fully exploited. The others do have lots of free capacity. So you have to coordinate from which LNG terminal the gas flows, via which pipelines will arrive to the countries which are most impacted when we will lose Russian gas, because not all 27 European member states are impacted by the Russian imports.
Yeah, it's interesting, I think, because listening to you, one of the ideas of where energy security comes from for Europe that motivated the third energy package, and the idea of a more integrated, more flexible, more connected system, more reliance, integration into a global market. When there's a disruption, you can pull supplies in from somewhere else. You just have to be willing to pay the price to pull them in, because there's only so much LNG in the world in the near term. But I hear you saying it's not just market forces. There's an important role for government to engage and negotiate and figure out where the supplies are going to come from. It's not just let the TTF price rise as high as it needs to rise. So just say another word about the platform. Is it what it's going to do? Is it negotiating with all LNG sellers, including the US and Qatar? Is it negotiating with where the FSRUs are going to come from? What role is it playing in facilitating how those market forces play out?
Well, most of the available volumes are already contracted, and we will not start renegotiating them. Well, existing contracts we do respect, but then there are announcements, political announcements that some of our partners are willing to provide additional volumes that otherwise they could sell at the world market. And that means that this is also a clear signal that at this moment, where Europe and some of our nations have to pay extremely high price, that our good partners don't want to earn like unfair revenues out of this this war situation, and I think that that this is a necessary support at large scale. Actually, we do have, again, if I can mention this kind of solidarity at very small scale. We set up a platform how all the countries all across globe can support Ukraine, who needs energy commodities, who needs specialized equipment to repair their grids that were damaged by Russians. And of course, it doesn't make sense that everybody starts these shipments from the other side of the globe, but they can provide some kind of financial aid, and then the hub, which is in Poland, can deliver what is needed. And I think that this is a very positive message that we do have right now, that there is such a broad support to Europe, but also to Ukraine, so that they will be able to win the war, because this war is a clear very decisive. If one country, if one nation has a right to choose their own destiny and decide about their future, we will just ignore the situation and say that we want to keep our GDP growing, and let's opt for the version that we just don't notice what is happening there.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. Often the discussion of how Europe would cope focuses on where other supplies will come from. You earlier in our conversation, I noted it when you said promote savings. And it feels like we don't talk enough about what can be done to encourage demand and reduction and conservation. Just dialing down the thermostat a few degrees in the winter, if everyone does it, actually is a big number. It makes a difference. Why do you think that is? Why aren't we talking more about that? And what are the biggest things that can be done to reduce demand?
Well, I even don't know why we are ignoring this option, because actually high energy prices should, well, logically, they should guide us towards savings. But
many governments are trying to protect consumers from those high energy prices.
Yes, and then you don't even see what is the real price of your energy consumption, what is there. But in Europe, well, I think that that our consumers start to understand that even if you are from the country that doesn't consume Russian oil or gas, if you save a little bit what you consumed yesterday, then it allows the neighbors to get rid of imports from Russia. So this is already, well, not about your own budget, but it is a small thing that you can do to support the ones who are fighting for democracy in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. You know, I've heard President Biden say this, many European leaders, I've heard you say this, we need to walk and chew gum at the same time. We need to meet today's energy needs and keep energy affordable and keep the lights and the heat on, and that still requires hydrocarbons. But we should also remember that if Europe, others were less dependent on hydrocarbons in the first place, you may be less vulnerable, and we need to accelerate an energy transition, not just because of the climate crisis, but also for energy security reasons. Talk about how we do both of those things. What does it mean for investments in fossil fuel infrastructure today? Should we be making those in LNG import terminals? How do we make sure the things we do today don't undermine the ability to have a faster transition?
Mm-hmm. Well, at European level, we decided that we will not invest into the assets that very soon might end up as stranded assets. And that's why any kind of gas investments in the future, they have to be compatible for hydrogen, so that we can relatively easily at least retrofit them so that they will transport clean gases instead of natural gas. And but well, these kind of investments into the gas pipelines or LNG terminals, they have happened against the market because there is still a need to use gases. Well, the switch from coal to gas actually had a result that we met our 2020 targets. We cut our greenhouse gas emissions significantly because compared to coal-fired power plant, gas emits significantly less. But now we know that we have to, well, accelerate our green transition. So in the volume-wise, what do we promise to do by 2030 in energy efficiency, in renovating our buildings and in renewable side? This adds up by 2030 the same volumes that are covered right now by Russian fossil fuels. But now we know that we don't have time until 2030. So we ask our governments to do what they can to front load all the investments. And all of them have announced that they will have a very ambitious renovation projects, because if you do have old buildings which are not renovated, which are not properly insulated, then basically just to keep normal temperature indoors, you consume significantly more than after the renovation. So these kind of simple things that actually do great jobs too are step by step gaining prominence, because now they are not only about our climate goals, they actually do help us to get back our energy independence.
You know, I think the history of energy crises is we say that, and then we sort of say, what can we do to respond to the immediate crisis? Where's some extra oil supply going to come from? What's in Iran? What's in Saudi Arabia? What's in strategic stocks? And then let's not forget that we need to move faster to move off of oil dependence. And we kind of forget to do the next part when the immediate crisis passes. How do we make sure that doesn't happen this time? And do you think this crisis is going to accelerate or decelerate the energy transition? Is it net positive or negative? I mean, it's on the whole, obviously horrific in terms of its humanitarian, but just for this question, net positive or negative for, say, the European Green Deal or Fit for 55?
Well, right now, I think that it is a positive thing that we are front loading our actions. Yes, it is costly, But in the longer run, well, replacing imports with homegrown renewables, actually, this is a good thing for European economy. So instead of shipping billions of euros to Russia, we are investing using also loans and the firepower that we get from financial institutions, but over the decade it already makes sense also economically. And then of course we also have to guide our industry in the way that our energy security is still taken care of. And that's why we are not saying that we will get rid of natural gas as such. We will need gas because we don't have other alternatives in this decade. And this was also the reason why European Commission announced our guidance to financial institutions, what are sustainable investments, and we covered some very concrete natural gas investments, because as I was telling you earlier, our trading partners also need some kind of time perspective, how long they can expect that there is a market case in Europe if they will invest into the additional facilities right now.
Do you think it'll, I'm going to open it up in 1 second. Do you think it'll have on nuclear power? Do you think it'll have what's happening now is going to increase the interest in investing in new nuclear power in Europe or delaying the retirement of existing nuclear power?
Well, already one of our member states announced that despite the previous decision that they will close down all the nuclear power plants by 2025, now due to this current situation, they have to postpone it. And several other member states have announced new nuclear projects. But of course, we do have also a challenge that 5 European member states do receive their nuclear fuel from Russia. So this is not so well, there is also a dependency if you use, and if you do have nuclear power plants that were built by Rosatom, and where fuel comes only from Russia. So we have to diversify also their ability to use alternative fuels.
Right. Well, I'm going to take a few questions from the audience. We have some here as well. Just for those joining us via Zoom, just a reminder, you can submit a question for the commissioner by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We have someone with a microphone here. Right, maybe up here. There's 2 questions, I think. And then after you ask question, and we'll take, and then when you're done, just pass it to Lily next to you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for being here with us today. We really appreciate it. My name is Ferdinand. I am European from Vienna. I'm a student here at Columbia at SIPA studying energy policy. My question was about, we talked a lot about gas already, and my question was about the link between gas and electricity prices in Europe. So we know that gas in many countries is kind of the price setter for electricity prices. And we also talked about how if we wanted to keep attracting gas from other regions, gas prices will probably have to remain high in order to flow to Europe. So if gas prices remain high and then they remain the price setter for electricity prices, then electricity prices in turn will remain high, and they've already been unsustainably high over recent months, damaging European or causing pain to European consumers. So my question was, how can you address this kind of unsustainable link between high gas prices that we may need in order to attract all the gas that we can't import from Russia anymore, but also then breaking that linkage to electricity prices so that European consumers don't suffer? Thank you.
Will you take one by one?
Yeah, we'll take one by one, yeah.
Well, this was a very good question because actually this morning, well, morning here in East Coast, afternoon in Europe, I received a report from our regulators whom we tasked to exactly analyze how we can avoid this unwanted volatility that has happened in European electricity market, because we do have a system where the electricity producers who are offering their products with cheaper price can come to the market first, and then according to the merit order, the last one sets the price, and the rest will earn the same revenue. And there are some ways, well, actually 13 steps that we can take if ministers will support this. And next Monday, well, this Monday, I will have an extraordinary meeting with ministers where I guess we will, well, I don't know if we will find a consensus, but for sure we have to discuss how to find ways so that this extraordinary situation at gas market will not have such a poisonous impact on our electricity market. But so far, all the member states have used different measures that we just suggested already last year. They have provided temporary direct support schemes for households. Now we also allowed member states to use the additional revenues that they have earned due to this high price, and work is ongoing.
Let me pose one audience question from Zoom, and then we'll go to our next student question. The question on Zoom is the Commission considering slowing its planned coal phase out given the current supply crunch?
Well, all our member states have committed to become climate neutral by 2050. And this is still commitment that everybody keeps. But 2050 means that there were several governments who announced coal phase-out date significantly later than this decade. And that is actually what is happening, that coal is back, because despite our ETS system, emissions trading system, that adds every power generator well, a additional costs, depends how much they emit emissions, and coal-fired power plants are well impacted most. But despite that, their production right now is significantly cheaper than gas-fired power plants can put to the offer. So that means, yes, coal is still in our market, and several member states do produce coal themselves. And this is also the reason why in our 5th package of sanctions, we targeted Russian coal. So we are not importing Russian coal.
Yeah, and of course, what matters for climate is not just whether one can get to a net zero 2050 end state, which unfortunately is incredibly difficult right now, but also the pathway to get there, right? The total area under the curve, the cumulative emissions. Next.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Simpson. My name is Lily. I'm also a master's student in SIPA. I wanted to ask you a question on demand response and role of citizens. I'm aware that IEA and EU recently came up with a report on how to reduce demand and what role citizens and governments can play. And I see that the number reduction that could come out of it is quite significant, but I wanted to ask how you could mobilize citizens' actions.
There was a question a few rows back. I forget who raised their hand, but just to tee the next, you please answer, and then I just want to get the microphone to the next person.
Well, I think that there are some necessary preconditions that we have to offer at first to citizens, and smart metering and digitalization is one element that has delivered better conditions to these market regions where they are in place. So I'm always telling to my counterparts that when I'm traveling, then in my mobile phone I do have this application that allows me to to switch my heating off or on depends what is electricity price at this very moment. Very comfortable. So you don't have to heat your home in January if you are not, well, a little bit you have to, but well, not so comfortably warm if you know that you will not be around. But this is possible only due to the smart, digitalization and smart metering, and this is not available for all our consumers. But this is also necessary for the ones who want to install, for example, solar rooftop panels for their houses, because otherwise, if distribution system operators are not willing to connect them, then your optimism will die there, and this is a challenge. But overall, our governments are ready to go finance these improvements, and I hope that this will have a visible results during a very short time span.
Let me take one other Zoom question and then go to the next audience question. And I think I know the answer because you told me it before we started, but evidently others are interested too, hence the question. Yesterday, Bloomberg reported that 4 European gas buyers had already paid for supplies in rubles. And the question is, what is your message to these companies?
We just had yesterday a gas coordination group. All our member states are coordinating information, and there 2 countries who were targeted share their information, Poland and Bulgaria, what kind of help they need. But the others also shared information if they know any of private companies who have made payments in rubles. And according to our information, this information is not true. And there are different deadlines for payments. So I don't have any information about any European company who has set up ruble payment account. And from our side, we have been very clear that this is a breach of sanctions.
Yeah, there was yeah, please.
Hi, Commissioner. Thank you again for your time. I'm also a master's student here at SIPA. My name is Alondro. Also on the subject of gas, you spoke earlier about one of the ways that Europe will, have to deal if Russia cuts off more gas supply is by shuffling around LNG imports and trying to find spare capacity in terminals that already exist. Much of the reporting says that a lot of the spare capacity in Europe is centered in Spain right now, where there are a lot of LNG terminals that don't operate at full capacity. But the bottleneck is that there is not enough transmission lines from the Iberian Peninsula into the rest of Europe gas markets. So what does the EU plan to expand, or do you plan to expand that transmission network in order to deal with a cutoff of gas supplies in order to access more of that LNG import capacity out of Spain?
Well, we are mapping right now the possible bottlenecks, if we do have any, and basically the LNG terminals in Spain that are not connected with France are in the region for Europe, which is not severely impacted by the Russian by the disruption from Russian gas. So most likely the bottlenecks are in eastern part of Europe, and Spain's well, I do believe that Spain needs to be better interconnected to the rest of the Europe, the Iberian Peninsula, Spain and Portugal. But the challenge is right now that they don't have also electricity interconnections. So if I would suggest where Europe should invest our funds, then electricity interconnections are the key. And we can address the gas crisis with short-term measures that doesn't force us to invest into stranded assets in the future.
Let me take another Zoom question related, not directly, maybe indirectly to the current crisis in Europe, but it's more a question to comment on what's happening in the US. I saw you met with the US Energy Secretary yesterday. I don't need to tell you the political system is not functioning incredibly well in Washington right now. So the question is, how concerned are you that the US isn't putting in place the measures it needs to cut emissions, and the burden is going to fall on Europe to make up for that?
Well, we do have extremely good cooperation with Secretary Granholm, and I think that the best testimony for that was that in this February we had EU-US energy dialogue, the first one after 3 years. So it was this format was created 2009, and now this was really very timely. And the follow-up was the business-to-business event that took place yesterday in Atlantic City, and gave opportunity for offshore wind and offshore energy companies to meet here. So United States is not in the situation, in the same situation as Europe is. Well, United States is energy independent, but it doesn't mean that you have to,
Europe is looking to the United States to help it with US
yes,
energy right now.
And we have received help in terms of LNG, but now I will quote one of the CEOs of fossil fuel company who said that we will end area of fossil fuels, not because they are not available, but because there will be smarter technologies available. And offshore wind, for example, is a technology that is already large scale, mature, and helps us in several ways. Creates also lots of jobs in coastal areas where otherwise it might be difficult to find good and well-paid opportunities.
Yeah, I think the famous quote making the point you were just making, the Stone Age didn't end because we ran out of stones. I think it was Sheikh Yamani, the Saudi oil minister at one time. Commissioner Kadri Simson, thank you for making time in your incredibly busy global travels to join us at Columbia University today. And thanks to our live audience, thanks to all of you joining virtually. As we mentioned, the full video recording of this event will be available on the Center on Global Energy Policy's website in a few days. Our next event, Energy Companies and the Energy Transition, Transforming the Organization, a deep look at ESG issues, will be held virtually on May 10th at noon Eastern Time. For a full calendar of upcoming events, please visit the Center on Global Energy Policy's website. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for being with us today. We look forward to seeing you soon. Please join me again in thanking Commissioner Simpson.
Thank you.